No, just no. Not by the stretch of an imagination is The Last of Us Part 2, objectively speaking, the game of the year. Just no. But let me make a fine disclaimer here, and that is that I genuinely liked The Last of Us Part 2. I liked it. There are elements in there I didn't like, absolutely, but what I specifically liked about this game is I like Naughty Dog in terms of what they bring as games. Drake's Fortune, right? Uncharted, liked every part of it. Some were better than the others, but okay. The Last of Us Part 1 was an absolute bombshell in terms of how good a game was for the PlayStation 3, and they really showed what they could do on that system still in terms of quality and visuals and storytelling, gameplay. And then The Last of Us Part 2 was announced, which was, of course, highly anticipated. Let's be fair, it was highly anticipated. Fans wanted it, and what I generally liked about the game was the gameplay, rock solid, visual, a masterpiece. I like the level design. Of course, some parts are better than others, but that's all about the games, right? But overall, I like the experience. What I didn't like was what they've done to the characters, how they introduced the new characters. And of course, yes, the message behind the characters, but people who are screaming their lungs out that men don't like strong women or lesbians in games or what have you, or the whole woke discussion, I don't give a shit about that whole discussion. I give a rat's ass if it's a woman or a man in a game. I just like the game. Horizon Zero Dawn, Tomb Raider games. I like them all. And it's not because there is a woman there. It's the character itself. And whether that's a man or a woman, I don't care. It's the character. And with The Last of Us, especially Part 1, the whole saga, the whole universe, it was just fantastic. And if we take now Part 2, yes, they try to package some kind of a message in there, and I don't like that message because I just, for me, there is no distinction between men and women. Everybody's equal, and if the game is good, the game is good. So I want to judge a game for what it is, a game, and not because of the whole political or social discussion that's behind it. But if we look at The Last of Us Part 2, there are other games in 2020 that did way better in terms of Metacritics and score. Game of the year should be judged by gamers, not by journalists or woke journalists or whomever, but the players should decide what is the game of the year. Now, I've took the liberty of just searching for two. Let's start with Last of Us Part 2, which got a 9.3 Metascore with 121 critic reviews. And if we look at the user score, it's a 5.7 mixed on average reviews based on 184,791 ratings. If we look at Ghost of Tsushima, I've ate some sushi yesterday, so maybe that's it. It had an 8.3, so it scored lower in terms of the critics of the Metascore, but a 9.2. And it's 122 critic reviews, but 18,000 people just gave it a 9.2. And if you look at Doom Eternal, 8.3 based on 2,000 ratings. And again, 48 critic reviews gave it. So yes, I know this game can't be put in line. It's first-person shooter, third-person, not a real open world, but RPG-like game. But The Last of Us 2 had a 5.7. So how can this be the game of the year? It just can't. There are other reasons behind this choice of being a game of the year. Now, if we now look at a article in Forbes by Eric Kane, senior contributor at Forbes, who made a very strong, sometimes a bit harsh, maybe left and right, but Naughty Dog's The Last of Us 2 is one of those video games that's pretty much destined to win the game of the year. whether or not it deserves it. That's already a mismatch. The game should deserve it, right? If we look at the Metascore, it didn't deserve it. There is so much heft and gravitas and industry-wide groupthink with this sort of game. People say it's super deep, and so it is. People say it's a masterpiece, so it becomes the critical darling, swept up in a wave of praise. It ticks off all the right boxes with all the right people, to the point where saying it's not the best game of the year is almost verboten, which means forbidden, of course, in Germany. But it makes you one of them, you know, the type, those neckbeard basement dwelling types who rail against social justice warriors and think women have no place in video games. It's bullshit. Well, in terms of my case, the game is great. It's a visual masterpiece. The gameplay is rock solid. That's a personal opinion. I like the entire experience. It's not about the message behind it. It's not being Ellie being a woman or even a lesbian. I don't give a rat's ass. It's just that the game has so much backlash because of the political bullshit that's put in there that people just don't like it. If you take Horizon Zero Dawn, people gave it a 9 even, I believe, because it was just a great game. And I think for the most part, games should stay away from political issues or any other bullshit. If you don't get into line and act like The Last of Us Part 2 isn't basically Schindler's List or something, you must be one of them. If you do like it, on the other hand, you're probably a social justice warrior of the very worst stripe. Or so the endless tired internet outrage warriors tell us. With us or against us? Capisce? Well, it's not from my standpoint. I judge this game for what it is. And that it's a really, really, really good game. But the fact that Naughty Dog is trying to push this political agenda into the game, I'm shying away from the fact that it's going to be the game of the year. On top of that, it's also a sequel, which doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be the game of the year. But I'd rather see a game win that is absolutely new to the party, right? Because that shows something. And for me, Ghost of Tsushima should have won this year. I'm not sure I'd classify Naughty Dog's ultra-violent, ultra-bleak, ultra-dark revenge fantasy focused on two white chicks who want to kill one another as woke exactly. Well, it isn't. Though it seems that much of the woke scene has embraced it as such. If anything, as Kotoka's review, which you can click on it, the game's diversity, which I appreciate at the beginning, just felt like an equal opportunity for different kinds of people to suffer as the game went on. And that's exactly what my problem is with this game. There is so much political bullshit around this game, but it isn't really about what the game does so much as how it's being interpreted by both sides of this stupid political and ideological divide we find ourselves in. There is a trans character in The Last of Us Part 2, which for one side makes it a sterling example of diversity in gaming. For the other side makes it a social justice warrior propaganda. For most of us, it doesn't really matter. And I'm one of them. I'm so glad I'm one of them. I give a rat's ass if somebody's a transsexual. I give a rat's ass if you're a lesbian. I give a rat's ass if you're a woman. Not saying that it's good, that it's negative. I also don't care if you're a man in a game. I like the game, the characters, the story, how it develops, blah, blah, blah. And for me, they screwed up the whole story in Last of Us 2. And the new characters they introduced are just... It's not fun how they introduced this. We aren't going to judge a video game by the inclusion of trans persons or not. We want to know if the game is fun and if the story is compelling, if it looks good. We like good characters, whether or not they're trans, Asian, gay, or whatever. That's exactly what I'm hearing. Yeah, The Last of Us Part 2 looks good, but it's neither fun nor compelling, and most of its characters are awful. Well, for me, it is a fun game. I like the mechanics, I like the gameplay, and if you just put aside the whole narrative and the whole story and the characters, it's quite fun to kill those infected, right? Or just the other AIs. The narrative, about which I've spilled a great deal of ink, is a complete mess. A juvenile revenge fantasy that absolutely ruins the first game's best character, Ellie, and writes out its second best, Joel, spending far too much time instead on Abby, who is completely unsympathetic character. That I do get, because this is objectively stripped from any political. Abby is not very sympathetic character, and I couldn't relate with her at all. So, and stripping away Joel, yeah, wasn't really a fan service. It really doesn't matter though, does it? Which game won the game of the year? It's just a vote from a bunch of video game outlets that has, at least in years like this one, a clear outcome and a clear favorite. And that's exactly my biggest point. The Game of the Year awards are not a reflection of what gamers find. It's a reflection of what corporate entities, journalists, what their favorite is. And that's a very small group. So if you take Ghost of Tsushima, user score 9.2. The Last of Us 2, 5.7. Doom Eternal even 8.3. So, you know, I can even look up Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn user score 8.4. It's a female in the lead here, and which is just a great example of storytelling. It's a great example on graphics. It's a great example on development, on fun, everything. So the fact that you don't want The Last of Us 2 as Game of the Year has got nothing to do with the fact if you're in favor or against transsexuals, lesbians, or women. For me, Last of Us Part 2 is not Game of the Year. It's a great game by all means. I would have rated it higher than the 5.7 Metacritic score, or critic score, user score, if you will. I would give it an 8, but that's a personal opinion, right? You could differ with that, but based on what my experience was with this game, it's an 8. But if I look at Game of the Year, I would say Ghost of Tsushima would have been the real deserved winner. Guys, I just wanted to get it off my chest. I will be with you as soon as possible with some gameplay, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six, and some techno, guys. Some good, strong sets. I bought some new equipment that I really want to share the results with you guys. See you soon. Back to the madness.